Audi S4, new for 2020. More speed, more stuff, more looks.
Diesel! Wait, what?
They had to spoil it, didn't they?
Whose idiotic idea was this? At what point did somebody at Audi go, I know, why don't we make one of our main performance cars a diesel? And even worse, which ballbag at the top of Audi Towers heard that idea and thought, yeah, this is great, we'll do this?
Don't worry, that accent still falls into the light-hearted xenophobia category that it's still alright to do, I think.
Anyways, diesel. Making the S4 a diesel is weird because, well, it just is. But also because everything else seems to be moving away from diesel. Now, a big part of that is, of course, due to the lads and lasses in the office just down the road from Audi. And diesel's just not a performance thing, right? There are obviously some quick diesel cars, some very quick ones. But it's not performance car fuel, is it? Now, it's not the caravan club fuel that it used to be, right? It's more like 2 dine-in for £10 at Marks and Spencer's fuel. Like the acceptable face of middle-class tightness.
And before you say it right, I know that Audi won Le Mans with this diesel car, but that sort of pisses over the narrative parade of what I'm trying to go with here. So we'll just forget that that exists for now, okay?
What was I saying? Oh yeah, diesel's an economy fuel. That really is the case. So if you look at the MPGs of the last S4 and then you look at this one, the difference is unbelievable. Well, not unbelievable, but impressive.
And because this is an S4, it at least looks the part too. Silver wing mirrors, body kit, many tailpipes, proper sports seats, carbon fibrous bits, and a general feeling that this is a fancy pants Audi. It's very obvious when you look at it. And for all of this, less than £50,000. Now that's a lot of change, true, but it's also very much on par with other top-endy, estatey stuff.
And so there you have it. The new S4 looks the part, and it's practical, and it's well equipped, and it's quite economical, and it has enough tailpipes under the tailgate for you to feel fine about being right up someone else's tailgate. Stereotype lols.
Oh yeah, it is quite quick too. That is a 0 to 62 time, much like your fingers after you've fueled the thing. Not to be sniffed at. So there you go, job done, cash register rung. Go out and buy one, and we're done. By then, subscribe to the channel, etc.
Now I know you can see this twist coming a mile away, but this is really good. All that good stuff I said before is true, right? So it's practical, it's well equipped, it's fairly well priced, it's really quick in a straight line. But I can honestly add to that switching to diesel was in itself a good idea. What an engine this engine is. So I know that switching to diesel now at this time with all our collective wokeness is kind of like Greg's announcing a kitten bake alongside the vegan sausage roll. But just have a listen to this fella, right? It doesn't sound good for a diesel, it just sounds good. Absolutely good. Like all angry, almost like a V8, but obviously without the top end screaminess. Now that is a thing, you do miss the top end, you do miss the natural reviness that you would get with a petrol engine. But in its place, you get an insane amount of low and mid-range torque. 700 NM's worth.
To contextualize that, compare it to the outgoing S4, and it just blows that car out of the tanning salon car park. It also has more torque than the frighteningly fast Mercedes C63 AMG, Mercedes AMG C63, and more torque than, get this, Lamborghini Aventador.
Bitch, get out the way, get out the way, bitch.
If you buy one of these, and you don't get that fact tattooed across your chest in massive letters, then we can no longer be friends.
Fine by me!
And because it's torque rather than power that gives you your true acceleration, you know, your low-end responsiveness, this just feels exceptionally quick. When you put your foot down, it's just on another level of the last S4.
Just tonight, baby, I wanna get
and it is one of those cars that can catch you out quite easily. And because the automatic gearbox flicks up and down its 8 ratios quicker than a teenager looking for Freeview filth on cable television in the 90s, it always seems to be right in the sweet spot. Another sweet spot is the way Audi has set up this chassis. Not quite as sweet, but a sweet spot all the same. So it's true that you could criticize the steering for being maybe a little bit on the light side and a little bit numb. The same with the suspension, really. It's a bit on the soft side and therefore a little bit numb. But actually, all that means is that this is a comfortable car most of the time. And this is not a sports car, really, is it? It might be tarted up like one, but it's not. It's basically a fast estate or saloon, dressed from top to bottom in the finest, most overpriced athleisure.
Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang.
You could criticize it for not feeling like a, I don't know, an Alpine, say, because it's not razor sharp on a B road and it's not transposing every crevice on the road up to the one that you're sitting on. But it is set up well enough and sharply enough to be a lot of fun most of the time. So the Quattro setup can send up to 85% of the power to the rear axle. Now the way that works is that when you plant your foot down and you've got a bit of lock on, the back end will start to swing out. In other words, it has a rear wheel drive characteristic. And what that does is it sort of gives you this win-win package of oversteery, rear-wheel drive type balance, but with four-wheel drive grip and assurance and confidence. Now, I'm not saying that this is the best thing in the world to drive. It does feel kind of bulky and it feels a bit artificial. You can never quite escape the feeling that there is a lot of trickery happening underneath you to make this feel the way it does.
Which there is. Now it has fixed sports suspension as standard, but you can trick it up with adaptive suspension and a rear differential that apportions torque across the rear axle. And it also has a software-based differential that works with the brakes to sort of tuck in the inside wheel when you're cornering to make it feel a lot sharper. It's clever stuff, right? And it all works really well, but at the end of the day, this is no substitute for just sending the power to the rear wheels.
But what you do get is the confidence to chuck this thing into a corner with almost reckless abandon. Not that I'm suggesting you do that, it's very irresponsible. But unless you're being a complete moron, this car will sort itself out. The way this works to keep you pointing in the direction that you want to go, and then the responsiveness that you get from the throttle because of all the torque going out of the corners, does make this really, really good fun to drive. It's really good at countering understeer if you turn the wheel a little bit too fast or if you're going into a corner a little bit too quickly. And then you can stick your foot down and poof, off it goes. It's idiot-proof, which works for me. Like, they've made it involving to drive, but without sacrificing too much comfort and day-to-day use. Put it this way, right? I reckon this is pretty rubbish on a track. It's bulky, it's on the soft side, the steering is light, it doesn't really rev, it only goes to 5,000 RPM.
But it is a brilliant motorway car. Bet you didn't see that coming. Actually, you probably did, it's an Audi estate. And what's more important? Exactly. Now, obviously the car I'm driving today does have the adaptive suspension because it's a press car, but it is money well spent because it really softens the car for the day-to-day stuff. But even without that, if you don't go with that, you are looking at typical Audi ergonomics, i.e. brilliant, and typical Audi infotainment, i.e. brilliant. As in, it's very quiet, but it's also solid, you know? Not like this guy.
Afraid so.
And even the cabin design, okay, which is technically last generation Audi, the newer cars are getting this sort of tri-screen setup now. It looks lovely and it's aging really well in my opinion. And because this is a facelift model, it gets a bigger touchscreen in the middle and that has made a difference. It looks good and it's nice to use, etc, etc. Now I do have to say at this point that when I had the car, I had it for a week, the digital instrument display failed 3 or 4 times. So it would turn on when the car started and then at some point during driving the car, it would just switch off and not come back on again. Obviously that's a problem, right? And it's only because I had a head-up display that I knew how fast I was going. Modern electrics, eh?
Is it perfect? Nope. So when it's cold and at low speeds, this gearbox can be a bit lumpy, a bit dopey, especially when you're down changing, it seems to shunt a little bit. And also on the motorway. So this gearbox has a coasting mode, freewheeling, right? And that's good, that's a good thing to have, but it is also annoying when you're just going along the motorway and you need to accelerate and then there's this really obvious gap between you putting your foot down and then the gearbox re-engaging and then you get this surge of power almost. It's not catastrophic by any means, but it is at odds with how refined the rest of the car is, and it really is. For all this engine sounds proper thunderous when you're giving it some, actually when it's just sat at like 1,000 RPM, which it is on the motorway, it's really quiet. And then these wing mirrors are surprisingly small, so you don't get a lot of wind noise rushing over them either. But yeah, that throttle response thing on the motorway is a bit of an issue, I think.
And that's double weird, right? Because this car has a really clever bit of electrical tech that is designed to speed up the throttle response in normal circumstances. So the engine incorporates this small electrical compressor that works with the turbo to kind of spool it up much quicker. It basically forces more air into the turbos when you accelerate. Now it works when you're driving hard. It's really good, in fact. You can really tell that it's doing something. The throttle response is pretty instant. But it's also completely negated by the gearbox's coasting function when you're on the motorway. I guess it kind of comes back to what I was saying before about the chassis in general. It's all really clever, but it somehow feels unnatural. Hey ho, back to reality. Let's do the boot. It's large. In the Avant, I mean. In fact, I don't know why anybody would bother getting the saloon version of this, but that's just me. In my opinion, the Avant looks better and is much more practical for not that much more money. As good as it is, I'm finding it quite difficult to get really excited about this car, for all that I do love the way it goes around a corner, and love the way it sounds, and love how bloody quick it feels away from the traffic lights. It has, in a way, fallen into that classic Audi trap of being a little bit too calculated, a little bit cold. It's just missing something, you know? I know that's a proper hackneyed criticism of an Audi, especially a fast one, but it's true, so I've got to say it. That's true in my mind anyway. You might disagree. And yet, I would definitely recommend it. So with these things, people do tend to plant their flag with the manufacturer that they like.
I like what I like, cause I like what I like, and I like.
So if you're a BMW lad or a Jaguar lass, this is unlikely to sway you away from their big equivalent 50-ish grand estates. They are all good, right? But what I would say is this: have a go of the Audi. There might just be enough here for you to change your mind. Not least that Lamborghini thing I said before. Please subscribe to the channel and have your say below. I really do enjoy reading what you say. Please share the videos around, tell your friends, and that way we'll get more people watching. Cheers. See you later. Bye. And because the automatic gearbox flicks up and down its 8 ratios quicker than a teenager looking for free view filth on cable television in the 90s. That analogy was a mouthful. Quicker than a teenager searching for free view filth on a cable. Because the gearbox flicks up and down its 8 ratios faster than a teenager looking for quicker than a teenager looking for. And because the automatic gearbox flicks up and down its ratios faster than a teenager looking for free view filth on cable television in the 90s. Hey. It always seems to be right in the sweet spot. A bit like the teenager.
Shit.